and doing AS levels at St Paul's Girls' School. And we have Shafali Sangani, who is a 6th-year medical student. Thank you.
Last winter, I attended a British Heart Foundation workshop on CPR. This was a lunchtime workshop at my school. After attending this, I realized how little I actually knew about CPR. This insightful workshop gave me a basic understanding of it, but I would not have the confidence or knowledge to be able to perform it in a dire situation. I realized that I now had the privilege of being aware of a matter that others may be less informed about. CPR is a skill that should be taught to more people, and in doing so is likely to result in higher survival rates in out-of-hospital cardiac arrests. NHS England reported that the ambulance services attempt to resuscitate approximately 28,000 cardiac arrests a year outside of hospital. Fewer than 1 in 10 people survive cardiac arrests currently in the UK, and CPR is attempted in only 20 to 30% of out-of-hospital cases. Evidence is suggested where CPR is attempted, survival rates are doubled. If we are able to increase bystander-initiated CPR from 32% to 42%, nationally we can expect to save 300 more lives every year. There are thought to be multiple reasons for low levels of bystander-initiated CPR, including lack of training and fear of litigation. Some statistics show that 71% of adults lack the knowledge and confidence to act if someone was collapsed and was unresponsive and breathing. 69% of adults told they lacked the knowledge and confidence to act if someone was bleeding heavily, and in addition to these scenarios, 81% also said they lacked the knowledge and confidence to act if a baby was choking. So as a nation, I think we can do much better. In countries where CPR is taught routinely in school, survival rates can be as high as 50%. For example, in Denmark, where learning CPR has been part of the school curriculum for children over the age of 11 since 2005. A study period between 2001 and 2010 showed that an increase in survival following out-of-hospital cardiac arrest was significantly associated with an increase in bystander CPR. During this study period, bystander CPR increased from 21% in 2001 to 44.9% in 2010. So the chain of survival. The time to initiating CPR in cardiac arrest is critical to outcome. Even the highest performing ambulance systems will be unable to get to a patient and start CPR more rapidly than a bystander who's present at the scene of the cardiac arrest. Bystander CPR is one factor among many associated with improved survival rates. So the first link is early access, which is dialing 999. The second link is bystander CPR. The third is early defibrillation, and the final link is early ALS and standardized post-resuscitation care. The cardiovascular disease outcome strategy specifically relates to improving the performance of the middle two links, namely improving the rate of bystander CPR and the use of automated external defibrillators. These are perceived to be the two weakest links in England at present. Evidence from Scandinavia and some parts of the USA has shown that targeting these areas can prove to be most impactful in terms of improving survival rates. It is hoped that increasing the number of bystanders trained in CPR will also positively impact on the first link and the fourth. The Community Resuscitation Group identified the following as its aspirations. They want to establish CPR training in all schools and mobilize relevant organizations to ensure this is done, and identify simple, consistent messages for the public and achieve greater public awareness of what to do when faced with an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. They want to improve audit and set up a national defibrillator database, as well as ensure that all activities are evidence-based, and where evidence is lacking, call for appropriate research. So, improving bystander CPR in the UK. Here are some statistics that show how having a higher rate of bystander CPR results in a higher survival rate. So, how can this be done? CPR training can be delivered through mass training events. It can be targeted at family members of patients at risk of cardiac arrest. Mandatory basic CPR testing should be part of the driving license qualification. Community CPR training and CPR training in schools has shown to be successful. Other promising modalities include technology-enhanced learning videos and mobile phone apps, as well as virtual reality training. Another way we can improve is using bystander-assisted CPR. This reduces the time to the first chest compression in out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. Dispatcher-assisted CPR is considered beneficial and is now more practical with the widespread use of mobile phones, which enable the rescuer to receive instructions while staying with the victim. Telephone instructions to the caller increase the rate of bystander CPR and reduce the time in starting it, and so improving the outcome from cardiac arrest. The Resuscitation Council of the UK recommends everyone who is able to should learn CPR. It should be taught in all schools, and defibrillators should be available wherever there are a large number of people. Evidence from overseas has shown that training all school children in CPR can dramatically improve bystander CPR rates and survival. School children should also be taught how to use an automated external defibrillator. Evidence suggests that it could be 1 in 4 people surviving if all young people were to be trained with basic life-saving skills. CPR being taught in school could create a nation of lifesavers, and thousands more mums, dads, grandparents and children could be saved every year. From 2020 onwards, all state-funded schools in England will be required to teach first aid as part of health education. This will include basic first aid for primary school children, for example, dealing with common injuries, such as head injuries. Young people in secondary schools will be taught further first aid, like how to administer CPR and the purpose of defibrillators. There are different schemes run across the UK, for example, the Heart Start scheme, as well as Little Rescuer, which is a course designed to teach first aid in a funny way to nursery and primary school children. This is not compulsory, but it should be, as it's one of the most important life skills you can ever have. As a teenager, I realized that many people of my generation can be immersed in their phones and other electronic devices. Because of this, I believe that a technological approach to education on CPR would be extremely beneficial and would help spread awareness to engage school children on this matter. The use of technology for the implementation of resuscitation guidelines is constantly evolving. Its development should be encouraged and analysed. Social media has a vital role to play in improving the outcomes from cardiac arrest. It can be used to disseminate awareness and education on the subject to vast audiences. It's also a powerful tool for effecting change. Innovative technology falls into several categories. There's the simple delivery of information, which is apps that display resuscitation algorithms, interactive delivery of information, apps that use the geolocation of the user to display the location of the nearest AED, interactive delivery of education, apps that engage with the user and create an immersive and interactive means of educating the user, and also notification and activation of bystander schemes. In the next presentation, Shafali will show you that the outcome of virtual reality CPR training is the same as an instructor-led course, and technology will help us provide better pre-hospital resuscitation to reduce death from cardiac arrest.
Okay, thank you very much, Anya, for trying to figure out the slides. Yeah. Thank you very much, Anya, for talking to us about CPR training in the community. I'm now going to talk through a study that was conducted by Dalal Hubail, who unfortunately couldn't be here to present today, validating the use of virtual reality for CPR training. This study was carried out at the Barts Cancer Institute under the guidance of Mr. Vijay Patel. Currently, there are various styles of teaching CPR, often as a one-off, irregular teaching, including instructor-led, feedback devices, peer training schemes, teaching in schools, even flashcards. And as the saying goes, there's an app for everything, so we have to talk about applications here too. This study, however, compares the traditional instructor-led course with the VR compression-only CPR training. There's an ongoing debate about compression-only CPR, and that is what we will look at for the final comparison of the two training methods. So firstly, some problems that can occur with current BLS teaching techniques. We can see from this slide that there are various issues people face when it comes to the traditional CPR training. Important ones to mention here are the limited practice within the training session itself, as well as the time period that occurs between training sessions. Studies have shown that without regular practice, newly learned skills have a tendency to decay in 3 to 6 months. Virtual reality is said to be an important teaching tool of the 21st century. The main feature of this teaching method is the immersive experience of the simulation. It allows the user to be transported to various places, providing a relevant and more realistic learning environment. Benefits of virtual reality in education include unlimited practice, improved learning and retention of the presented material, as well as practical aspects such as education for distance learning and the attraction to a younger demographic. Not to mention, the course itself only takes 15 minutes. We all know from being students ourselves that, our attention spans don't always quite get much further than that, so 15 minutes is very beneficial. It also brings that extra excitement for the younger crowd. So onto the experiment itself. The tested hypothesis was that the VR course will be enjoyable, realistic and easy to use with comparable skill acquisition to the traditional teaching method when looking at compression-only CPR, while also assessing and validating the use of the VR course as a possible teaching tool. The study was carried out earlier this year, and on the side we can see the different methods used for recruiting the sample groups. In total, 26 people attended the course. A baseline assessment was carried out, which included checking their current knowledge of BLS using the shown checklist, checking scene safety, were they able to recognize cardiac arrest, did they know to get help, perform chest compressions and ventilations at an appropriate ratio, as well as do everything in the right order. A Lardell QCPR feedback mannequin was also used to assess the quality and ratio of the practical skills, the compressions and the ventilations. The 26 that attended the courses were split randomly into 2 groups, with 13 undertaking the traditional course and 13 doing the VR. Now, the traditional course, as some of you may know, often takes between 3 and 5 hours to complete and includes a variety of other aspects other than the basic 30-2 compressions ventilations. These include the ABCD approach, bleeding, shock. For the VR course, users had a more streamlined experience, focusing on correct emergency protocol, checking the safety of the environment, the patient's responsiveness and breathing, and practice performing compression-only CPR. As mentioned, the course itself takes only 15 minutes and was taught using a headset and hand sensors, as can be seen on the screen. Now, this is a little graphic to show you how the interface works, but Anna will go through that in more detail later. Here we can see just a couple of slides to give you a feel. Check for breathing, and the final results. Okay. After completing their respective courses, participants in the study were assessed again using the same assessments as the baseline, with the assessment checklist and the Lardell QCPR feedback mannequins. This allowed us to examine the educational benefits of each course respectively. As we know, feedback is very important when trialling any new methods in the community, and so the participants in the VR course were also asked to complete the 2 questionnaires I'm going to show you now. This one takes into account the technology-enhanced learning experience, the face and content validation of the material, and finally, both groups were asked to complete a review regarding BLS confidence and concerns. Now, looking at these in a little bit more detail. The first looks at the current use of technology in education and asks whether or not the participant has any experience using these alternative or newer methods. The second questionnaire on face and content validation of the VR course asks users to rate various aspects of the course, including ease of use, usefulness, and the content and experience itself. The final questionnaire asks about BLS confidence and concerns, and here we tried to attempt to understand a bit more about why even trained people hesitate when it comes to performing CPR in a real-life situation. In order to analyse the data, SPSS 23 was used to perform various statistical tests and calculate the mean for the quantitative variables, which were the total checklist, the QCPR results and the questionnaire, as well as the percentages for the categorical variables, the individual steps of the assessment checklist. This slide shows some of the demographic data results. As we can see, 46.2% of the traditional group and 30.8% of the VR group had in fact undertaken previous BLS training, with an average of between 2.5 and 3.5 years since their previous courses. We can also see here that the overall age average was in the mid-20s. With regards to the assessment checklist, the mentioned subcategories showed an improvement from the baseline in the traditional instructor-led course. Now, you look at this graph as well, and you can see again that the improvement seems to be higher in the traditional course. However, this difference was mainly due to the ventilation factor, ventilation ratio, which was not used in the VR course. So after removing these differences in categories, and anything not relevant to compression-only CPR, and recalculating the p-value for the final assessment, we can see in fact that the results are in fact significant, showing that both teaching methods are similar when it comes to compression-only CPR. The results with the QCPR mannequin told a similar story, and when looking at compression-only CPR, both methods were seen to be equal. When looking at the questionnaires, we can see that a significant percentage of participants had never used virtual reality headsets before in any setting, and that when asked their preferred methods of teaching or learning, along with live demonstrations and hands-on training, technology-enhanced learning, including virtual reality, scored highly. When looking at the face and content validation for the VR group, we can see that participants ranked all categories with an average of between 3 and 5, except the natural feel of the environment. Comparing BLS theory and testing, we can see that both groups conveyed similar knowledge after completing the course, scoring an average of 4 or more. Finally, when analysing BLS concerns and confidence, no major concerns were evident. Most people said that they weren't affected by the fear of contracting a disease or the ethnicity or gender of the victim, but it was more fears about legal liability as well as causing more harm. Finally, most people agreed that knowing the victim would in fact encourage them to start BLS sooner. And BLS confidence was shown to have similar results in both groups. Participants especially enjoyed the audiovisual feedback and appreciated the short time required to complete the course, which gives the chance for repeated practice while staying within the student's attention span. Both features which have been shown to reduce the decay of skills, as well as increase confidence. This learning pyramid shows retention rates of students with different teaching methods, and as we can see, practice, demonstration and audiovisual, which are all key factors of the VR course, show high percentages of retention. So we can see there are many positive features of using VR for BLS training. The immersive learning experience, higher knowledge retention, and the mobility of the device especially means it can be adapted, as Anya mentioned, to expand skills in the community by mass teaching, such as in schools, using this readily available tool for practice. However, always limitations. Limitations of this study in particular included the small sample size, as well as the ongoing development of the course to try and include ventilation. In conclusion, both courses showed an improvement in compression-only CPR skills with positive feedback from VR participants in regards to the ease of use, content and overall experience. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. I invite Anna Sarlova, the CEO of Global Health, to present around this topic.
Do you want to take this?